Department of Environmental Protection. And we are recording this meeting, as you might have just heard that in the background. So some of your colleagues who cannot attend can access this at a later date. Just a little background information about the work that I do at MassDEP. I work in the solid waste division in the commercial waste reduction branch. And today is our kickoff meeting for the Recycling Market Development Workgroup. And we're really excited to be starting this work group. We've had some success, we feel, gathering stakeholders for various DEP statewide work groups in the past. And, we noted we've got over 100 attendees now, and more are starting to file in here on this Thursday morning. So we're definitely thrilled to have you here. We hope that this will be an ongoing conversation, starting with this meeting and going hopefully into several other conversations in the coming months about how we can address the recycling market deficiencies in the Commonwealth. Kind of stimulate some of that business activity and come up with a recycling market development action plan. And that's hearing a lot of basically boots on the ground. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What do you want? What do we need to address? This initial meeting today is basically getting the lay of the land. We'll, and I think that's in the agenda slide. Claudine, if you could just advance that. There it is. It's a little, yeah, there we go. And so basically, there's three of us from MassDEP who are going to speak today, myself, John Fisher, and Claudine Elian. We're going to discuss some of our solid waste and recycling goals from our recently released 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan. We'll talk about what we're hoping to do with this particular group. And we're going to talk about some of the market development tools that we already have at our disposal, and also welcome colleagues from the Operational Services Division, Mass Development, and the Mass Office of Business Development to talk about some of their tools for businesses as well. And we want to leave a good chunk of time for discussion at the end. Next slide. A few webinar logistics. This diagram may not make a ton of sense to you, but if you've done Zoom before, there's various tools along the bottom toolbar that you can use to name yourself appropriately, mute, unmute, raise your hand, things like that. We do have a high number of attendees, so we're starting this meeting with everyone on mute. If you have a question about one of the specific presentations, please type it into the chat. I think there's a chat box down there at the bottom. You can also just raise your hand and we can call on you. Our intent along the way with this meeting, as people are speaking, is just to take clarification questions. When we're talking big picture discussion items, we do have that time reserved at the end, so we want to use that and save those for that time. So we're happy to address those bigger picture questions at that point in the meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to start with John Fisher. He's the Deputy Division Director for Solid Waste Materials Management at MassDEP. And he's going to get started with our talk today and some of MassDEP's goals in coming into this work group based off of the Solid Waste Master Plan. So thanks for joining us.
Great. Can you hear me okay, Sean? Excellent. Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone, for joining us here today. We're excited to have a great turnout for our kickoff meeting. I'm going to start and provide a little bit of context about our Massachusetts Solid Waste Master Plan. So our Solid Waste Master Plan provides a big picture plan for how we're going to work to manage our trash in Massachusetts. We update this plan on typically 10-year planning cycles. We just recently published our updated plan in October of 2021, and that plan runs through 2030 and lays out a vision for us to move beyond 2030. And I've provided a link to the Solid Waste Master Plan here after our presentation today will be posting this presentation online. We have a number of program links that we put into the presentation, so you'll be able to access those and learn more about some of the program areas we're speaking about here today. Next slide, please. So one of the critical points, really the focus of the master plan, is to ensure that we have adequate capacity to manage our waste. And when we look at that, our preferred option is to do that by reducing the amount of waste that we dispose of to begin with, whether it's waste prevention and source reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, anaerobic digestion, all of those forms of using materials in better ways than disposal. That's our emphasis through the solid waste master plan. So we've set waste reduction goals, a goal to reduce our disposal by 30% by 2030, and a goal to reduce disposal by 90% by 2050, and have, through the plan, laid out a number of strategies and action items to work towards achieving those goals. Next slide, please. When we think about our goals, one of the things that's important to think about is what's in our trash. And in working on this solid waste master plan, we spent a lot of time thinking about, if we're going to achieve these goals, what materials can we still divert from our trash? What materials are still recoverable? And, we went through an analysis where we set target diversion rates for all of these materials remaining in the trash. And that both informed our choice in setting our goal where we did, but in turn also makes us think about how we should prioritize our program efforts to address some of these materials. So this is looking, purely from a tonnage basis. Of course, there are other reasons to target materials, including toxicity of materials entering the waste stream. We certainly look at materials like plastic bags, for example, that may cause problems in our recycling system and may contribute to litter. So there's multiple reasons to target materials, but this is one of the ways that we look at it just for purposes of those overall waste reduction goals. And when we start thinking about market development as we go, one of the things that we'll be spending some time talking about is what materials should we focus our market development efforts on, and we'll return to some of this data along the way as we go through that discussion. Next slide, please. Sorry, I just noticed one question pop up there in the chat. Are plastics considered part of the C&D stream? So generally, no, in this data, they're not. So that's all forms of plastics are grouped in that plastic category. So another important thing to think about, both in our solid waste master plan and in our recycling market development plan, is what does MassDEP do? And what don't we do? So I have a pair of slides about that that we'll be talking about. So among the suite of activities that we do at MassDEP include regulations and policies, so developing and updating those over time, permitting facilities that come to us to apply for permits, conducting inspections and compliance and enforcement activities for operating facilities, delivering grant and assistance programs, and implementing education and outreach programs. So those are the basic things that we do at DEP, and that's kind of our toolbox. As we'll hear over the course of the meeting today, there are certainly other state agencies working on issues relative to recycling market development that contribute other resources and capabilities and tools. So we'll be hearing more about those over the course of the meeting today. But those are the main things that DEP does and the main capabilities that we have to leverage both waste reduction and market development. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we generally do not do is we do not develop, plan, or operate specific facilities or collection programs. So those are typically run by either the private sector or by municipalities. And then we also generally do not develop specific legislation. We certainly do not pass legislation, but generally we do not work closely on legislation, and rather we focus our efforts on all the activities in that preceding slide focused on what we can do within our toolbox to affect all of this work. Next slide, please. So I'm going to take just a few slides here to highlight just some of the things that are new in the 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan. This is certainly not everything in the Solid Waste Master Plan. It's just highlighting a few key areas and priorities and some of the themes in this master plan. So one of the things to note just overall is that this is a very high level plan. If you read the master plan, it's short. The recommendations are written at a high level with the intent that they can last and be applicable and be broad enough to guide us over a 10-year planning period. Then what we propose to do is develop more detailed and flexible action plans along with a midterm program review to develop more specific program recommendations to guide us along the way. So there are several areas where we have established subcommittees and work groups. We have an organic subcommittee focused largely on food waste reduction. We have a construction and demolition materials subcommittee. We have a reduce and reuse work group, which I'll talk about more in a moment. And then of course, what we're here for today, our Recycling Market Development Workgroup. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the Reduce and Reuse work group. That group met very actively over the course of the past year or so and provided really valuable input to MassDEP to develop and establish our first Reduce and Reuse action plan. And this plan is now available up on our website. We have the link we can share with you here in the presentation after the meeting. So some of the things that are in this action plan are to reuse durable materials, things like furniture, to repair durable products like appliances, to share materials. For example, there's a lot of sharing libraries out there for things like power tools, and then to reduce material use. So an example of that might be single-use packaging. So the Reduce and Reuse Action Plan lays out a number of strategies for how MassDEP is going to work to try to influence and foster more of these activities going forward in Massachusetts. And next slide, please. Another emphasis in the 2030 plan, and this is really running through all of MassDEP's program areas, is more engagement with and support of environmental justice communities. So these are communities that meet specific criteria relative to either income levels, minority populations, or numbers and percentage of non-English speaking households. So we've been giving a lot of thought to how we are going to better engage with and support people and businesses in these communities. Next slide, please. So some of the things we've talked about in the Solid Waste Master Plan are prioritizing these communities for grant awards. We've already implemented some changes relative to that. We're looking at rolling out more assistance through our Composting Technical Assistance Program for composting activities at community gardens, particularly in environmental justice communities. MassDEP has an existing illegal disposal surveillance program. It's what we call our Candid Camera program that works to identify and enforce illegal dumping violations. And we're looking to continue to roll out that program to environmental justice communities. We're looking to promote use of hybrid and electric trash and recycling collection vehicles. Again, with a focus on environmental justice communities, MassDEP actually just rolled out a number of grants for these types of vehicles, not just for trash and recycling, but across the board. And then improved notice for facility permit processes and improved engagement with environmental justice populations through our facility permitting. So those are some of the things that we're looking to do in this area. There'll certainly be more as we go. We're really looking to implement this across all of our programs. Next slide, please. So we'll be talking much more about this slide here in a moment. Claudine will be going into some of this a little bit more, so I'll just touch on this briefly. Of course, our Recycling Market Development Workgroup we're launching here today. Over the course of the work with this group, we're looking to develop a recycling market development action plan. And Claudine will be talking more about that process. At the same time, we're also working with our Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and other state agencies to launch a state agency recycling market development council, which will be focused on state agency purchases of recycled content and other environmentally preferable products. And then in the master plan, we also announced a $1 million innovations grant program focused on innovations across our waste reduction system. We still have more thinking to do to determine exactly how that program is going to be targeted. And we hope that, among other things, this group will provide us some thoughts and ideas in that regard as we work to develop that program this year. Next slide, please. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about our waste disposal bans over the course of the meeting today. So again, I won't spend a lot of time talking about this now, but we recently, concurrent with publishing the final 2030 master plan, also published regulations that ban the disposal of mattresses and textiles in solid waste, and then also take an existing ban on commercial food material and lower the applicable threshold for that ban from 1 ton to 1/2 ton per week. Those new bans will be taking effect in November of 2022. And as with all of our bans, we look to implement them through a comprehensive approach, includes recycling market development activities, education and outreach, compliance assistance, and eventually enforcement. And, I think it's really important in this context to understand that we often use these bans as a market development tool to really drive the supply of materials to encourage growth of markets here in Massachusetts. And then we've also been working a lot with our construction and demolition debris handling facilities to establish a minimum performance standard that will ensure a level playing field across that industry, and also as we go, continue to increase the separation of materials for recycling. So that is just some of the highlights in the 2030 Solid Waste Master Plan. If you're not familiar with it and haven't had a chance to take a look at it yet, I encourage you to take a look at it after our meeting here today. And we will share the link in our presentation that we post following the meeting, but you can also just go to the MassDEP website and search for the Solid Waste Master Plan. So with that, I will wrap up my comments, and happy to, I think, we can take, if there are kind of any quick questions directly to what I spoke about, happy to take a couple of those now.
John, I'm just looking at the chat here. A couple of general questions here. One is, are plastics included in the T&D waste stream?
Yeah, in the waste characterization data, what's shown for plastics is generally all of, anything that's a distinct plastic material. One of the things we can share, actually, when I get done speaking here, I'll just put it in the chat. We have waste characterization studies that are up on our website. So we can share that link in the chat as we go here. And then, I encourage people to take a look at that after the meeting. That provides more detail on, what each of these materials are and how they're categorized. But generally speaking, all of anything that's, plastic is typically included within that plastics category.
Great. Thank you, John. That was Jay Thomas, by the way. This one from Marco Castaldi. How are you defining disposal? Do you follow the EPA hierarchy or differently?
I can take a crack at that. Also, I'm not sure what's happening. You're echoing a little bit, Sean. I'm not sure if something changed with your audio. How are we defining disposal? Disposal in Massachusetts, so we're talking about solid waste disposal. So it's nothing to do with a hierarchy, but it's any material that's sent for solid waste disposal, which means either a landfill or a municipal waste combustor. So that's how we define disposal, and it can be in-state or out of state.
Audio any better now, John?
It sounds like it's still echoing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can get a different mic or something. There was a question. If you can hear me, and this is actually passable. Steve Buck-Sansi asks, will the Market Development Council consist of state personnel? Might be helpful to have some stakeholders.
Yeah, and you're still echoing quite a bit. I can go into the chat and deal with these questions for the moment. So the Market Development, the State Market Development Council itself will be, the members of that council will be representatives of state agencies, but there has been some talk about inviting external stakeholders to those meetings to lend some outside perspectives. So the actual council members themselves will be state agency representatives, but I expect the external folks there'll be some opportunities for external folks to participate as well. Let me go through these other. Actually, yeah, there's quite a bit here.
Can you hear me now, John?
I can.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, good. I just set up a different mic.
Okay.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, there are there are quite a few questions. I mean, it would make sense on a meeting with 150 people when you're kicking off a work group that there would be a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think maybe we should hold off on these, and try to allow more time for more questions and discussion towards the end, maybe.
Sure, I'll make a note of where we are right now, and we'll we'll get to those later on in the meeting. But I guess we can move on to Claudine.
Yes, hello everyone. Again, I'm Claudine Ellian, Commercial Waste Reduction Branch Chief at MassDEP. And yeah, again, just kind of taking a step back, when we refer to, recycling market development, we're, essentially, seeking to build demand for the materials we collect, in our recycling and reuse programs. On this slide, as you can see, in terms of this work group schedule for this winter 2022, including today's meeting, which will be focused on, Massachusetts market development support. We're also planning on having another meeting sometime in February or March, which will be focused on market development programs from other states and regions. Also, during these first 3 months or so, we'll develop an initial list of stakeholder program input and suggestions, and of course, receive input on target materials. So in terms of the spring and summer of 2022, so April through September of this year, we'll hold another 3 work group meetings on categories of programs that are currently to be determined, but could include infrastructure development, so involving state grants and loans, procurement and other market demand strategies, workforce development and training, research development, including technology development, as well as education and outreach and regulations. So we'll then define the action plan framework and the recommended strategies by program category, as well as list the strategies as short-term, medium-term, or long-term, and of course define target materials. So now getting into the schedule for the end of this year to early 2023, our plan at MassDEP is to hold another 2 work group meetings and prepare the draft recycling market development action plan and obtain stakeholder feedback, from all of you on that draft plan. We'll then, seek MassDEP management review and approval of the plan, and we'll post the plan on the MassDEP website and present to the stakeholders, at this working group and at a solid waste advisory committee meeting. So looking at 2023 and beyond, we'll of course, implement the plan. We'll review and update the plan as needed and report on the progress annually to this work group. So now I will just briefly run through some of MassDEP's market development programs. So starting out with the Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant, or Rbdg. This program helps Massachusetts recycling processors and manufacturers create sustainable markets for the eligible materials listed here. And of course, with future grants, this list can change. And the selected applicants receive grant awards between $50,000 and $400,000. And we've awarded 28 grants for $4.25 million. Also, we just wanted to highlight that the evaluation criteria includes whether the applicant is registered as a certified business in Commonwealth Supplier Diversity Program. And the application deadline for this current award cycle is April 8th of this year. So the Recycling Loan Fund is administered by BDC Capital and funded by MassDEP, and is another good way to obtain financing. Sean Silver works on that with others here at MassDEP, these loans are used to help Massachusetts businesses active in recycling related activities obtain the capital needed for any reasonable business purpose. So, general program parameters, include loans ranging from $50,000 to $500,000 and loans up to $1.5 million for anaerobic digestion projects. And the terms of this loan are, up to 10 years, and the loans could include working capital, refinancing, real estate, machinery and equipment, and acquisition financing associated with a recycling or reuse operation. And as you can see here, since 1996, there have been 80 loans totaling, greater than $18 million. So yeah, kind of moving on to our waste bans that John Fisher briefly spoke about earlier. MassDEP's waste disposal ban regulations have been in place for quite a long time, since the early 1990s. And many of you may already know that these regulations essentially say that certain materials are banned from disposal. And I know there's a question on this. Way we define disposal is landfills, combustion facilities, and solid waste transfer stations. We do conduct inspections at these facilities and primarily conduct enforcement on commercial generators and haulers. And since the first waste bans were introduced, mass municipalities and businesses, often supported by MassDEP grants and technical assistance efforts from Recycling Works, have developed new infrastructure to collect banned items and other discarded materials, and to divert them from disposal. So we do see that these waste bans act as a catalyst to market development. So here's the list of materials currently banned from disposal. As kind of noted earlier, the ban on mattresses and textiles will go into effect here this November. And again, as John mentioned briefly earlier, talking about the state agency Recycling Market Development Council. This is established by the Baker-Polito administration. And this council will be chaired by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and will focus on increasing the use of recycled materials in state building, construction and renovation projects, and increasing state purchasing of recycled content products. So the focus materials included, but are not certainly limited to asphalt, shingles, glass, compost, office furniture, and tires. So we at MassDEP work quite a bit with the Northeast Recycling Committee, which is a multi-state 501c3 nonprofit organization whose programs emphasize source reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, environmentally preferable purchasing, and decreasing the toxicity of the solid waste stream in the 11-state region. So in the fall of 2018, NERC, in collaboration with the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association, or NMOA, formed a regional recycling markets committee. And we're pursuing a number of projects to support and expand recycling markets in the NERC 11-state region. And over the past 18 months or so, a group of us state recycling officials from the Northeast have also worked together to develop the draft model legislation for minimum PCR content in trash and carryout bags and food, beverage, and household product containers. You can actually submit comments on this, and the public comment period for this draft model legislation is open until February 11th of this year. And NERC and NMOA will be hosting a webinar today at 1 p.m. to kind of walk through it. So NERC also formed a glass committee in August of 2017 to work on glass recycling in the Northeast. Brooke Nash, Municipal Waste Reduction Branch Chief at MassDEP and on the call today, works on that effort along with others. And this committee's goals are to better understand the recycled glass value chain and gaps in the region, and to promote greater diversion of glass containers to the highest value end uses. And lastly, in terms of our NERC participation, in April of 2021, the NERC board voted to form a bottle bill committee, and Sean Silver here works on that effort along with others. And the committee kind of works on improving and expanding bottle bills, as well as kind of the nexus between extended producer responsibility and bottle bills. And lastly, I'll mention the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program grants led by our Municipal Waste Reduction Branch Chief, Brooke Nash, that oversees these grants. And they kind of support the collection and supply side of markets, with $3.5 million per year for the Recycling Dividends Program, and $1 million per year for equipment and infrastructure. So to jumpstart the separation and collection infrastructure of residentially generated mattresses and box springs, in 2015, MassDEP and the state's purchasing office, or the Operational Services Division, went out to bid for mattress recycling vendors to serve public entities. And 3 mattress recycling vendors were awarded contracts. So concurrently, we created a new grant program to incentivize municipalities to separate mattresses from solid waste and send them for recycling. So this grant pays for the transportation of aggregated mattresses to the recycling vendor and for the recycling costs itself, as mattresses are dismantled and component commodities are sent to market. So we've also awarded grants to mattress recycling companies to help capitalize their operations and expand capacity to handle more mattresses. So this is an example of how the Recycling Dividends Program incentivizes best practices. In this case, we're looking at the tons of textiles recovered by two groups of municipalities, as reported, on their annual solid waste recycling survey. In blue are the tons recovered by municipalities that earned the textile criterion point by implementing, prescribed activities or best practices to publicize and collect textiles. In red are the tons recovered by municipalities that did not earn the quote textile criterion point. So, some pretty interesting data here to see. And, for more information on, any of this stuff, please visit our webpage. And, for any questions, following the meeting, the best, initial point of contact would be Sean Silver, who can, certainly pass along, questions on to other members of the team if necessary.
Sure. And if you get in touch with me, I promise I'll have a working microphone and we can have a nice, clear conversation. So thank you, Claudine, for taking the time to outline some of these, parts, I guess not of the plan, but the parts that will go into what we're hoping is a market development action plan for Massachusetts specifically. I know that NERC has done a lot of good work for the region, and luckily we have a great working relationship with NERC, and we feel like we can learn a lot from them in this process as well. We feel like we can learn a lot from a lot of the folks here that are on the call. Just based on your your industry knowledge, institutional knowledge of this particular subject. So we do have a couple other presentations on the way. Before we do that, I do want to dip into the chat and just check and see if there's anything specific for Claudine here. If you are looking at the chat, there was a question about schools. And if MassDEP plans to work with schools to educate children. I just want to note that John Fisher did answer that question. He says, relative to the question on schools, MassDEP's Green Team program focuses on recycling education programs in schools. He provided a link to that for more information. And additionally, Lynn from NERC with a link to register for the informational meeting that Claudine referenced today at 1 o'clock. So you can go in there, and I'm going to register myself right now. The post-consumer recycled content legislation overview, that's at 1 o'clock today. So those are just a couple of notes. I think mainly for some of these other questions, we can dive into those in the discussion. But Julia, if you're ready, we have Julia Wolf from the Mass Operational Services Division. She's the Director of Environmental Purchasing, and that has a tie into this as well. There's a lot of tie-ins to recycling markets in the stuff that we do here at the state and otherwise. So great. I can dial that presentation up for you, Julia, and we'll get into that right now.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure, let me share my screen.
Perfect. I don't know if you're able to hear me, see me.
Yes, I can hear and see you.
Okay, great.
Hi, and Claudine, I think we have it on the one participant can share their screen thing. So if you can just take yours down, then I can presumably put mine up.
Great. And so I'll get started.
Yeah, let me get the slideshow going here.
Sure. So
yep. I have some sort of silly menu bar that's like covering the slideshow command here.
Okay.
I'm really rolling today with this. Let me tell you. Okay, here we go. You should be good to go.
Thank you so much. So I'm Julia Wolf. I'm the Director of Environmental Purchasing for the Operational Services Division, or OSD. And just thank you guys for having me come speak today. It's really great to see such a large turnout for this very important topic. So these are my slides here. If you go to the next slide, this is my agenda. I'm just going to give a brief overview of OSD, then talk about Executive Order 515, and then talk more about the Environmentally Preferable Products Procurement Program, or the EPP program. And then I'll sort of dive into a little bit of market development opportunities and challenges. Next slide. So OSD is basically, for those of you that don't know us, the statewide agency that sets up and manages statewide contracts for goods and services. So we've got a number of departments under our roof, which is to support the statewide contracts, such as the Combis Operations Unit that manages the e-procurement system, training, marketing, etc. And the EPP program is actually technically part of the Strategic Sourcing Services Group. Massachusetts is fairly unique in that we have the EPP program within the procurement program, not in the sort of DEP equivalent, which I think is very important. So my background is environmental. In fact, I used to work at DEP in the Waste Programs Division and was hired at OSD 9 years ago with no procurement background. And I realized very quickly how complicated and dynamic procurement really could be. So the Commonwealth's EPP program is one of the longest standing in the country. We've actually been around for about 25 years. Next slide, please. So our statute limits us to the sales of goods and services. We do not oversee construction. That's located in other agencies. We currently have 105 statewide contracts that run the gamut from clothing to vehicles, food, fuels, professional services, you name it. So there's a lot available through the statewide contracts. And eligible entities who can use our contracts include state agencies. Just a note that executive agencies in the Commonwealth, they're actually required to use statewide contracts. Then there are public colleges and universities, a number of nonprofits, and then municipalities who can purchase directly from the contracts, which is allowable under 30B. We have a robust EPP program with thousands of products available and with a dedicated director, who's myself. And I help administer Executive Order 515, which I'll go over in a second. Next slide, please. So there's lots of benefits for public entities to use statewide contracts, including getting really great value, as we have significant buying power. We have over $2 billion in spend in just fiscal year 21 alone. And we do a lot of the administrative work. We develop the bids, we evaluate and award the bids, and manage the contracts. And this is especially important when it comes to EPPs, where we do the research to identify what to put in the bids, and we try to get as many green products available as possible. And then lastly, we have a lot of assistance that enables us to help the entities to purchase from the contracts. Next slide, please. So I just want to briefly go over Executive Order 515. It was signed in 2009, and it directs departments to buy EPPs whenever they're readily available, perform to satisfactory standards, and represent the best value to the Commonwealth. And the EPP program administers Executive Order 515. And part of that is that we also co-chair the Toxic Reduction Multi-Agency Task Force. We target toxic products on contracts and try to find alternatives. And we work closely with the sourcing leads to develop new EPP specifications. We also have the ability to designate minimum requirements through lots of market research. And we promote the EPPs to eligible users. We write an annual report. And also we work with many folks around the country on different projects, federal government, different states, nonprofits. And I also want to point out, of course, that we work closely with many of the state environmental and health agencies. And last year, Governor Baker signed both the new climate legislation, an act creating the next generation roadmap for Massachusetts climate policy. And he also signed the new Executive Order 594, leading by example, decarbonizing and minimizing environmental impacts of state government, which both play an important role in what we do at OSD. Next slide, please. So what are EPPs? They are products or services that have a lesser or reduced impact on human health and the environment when compared with conventional products. So here I've listed some of the characteristics we look for. We also encourage consideration of full cost accounting when identifying best value. And this includes looking at product life cycle along the supply chain. Next slide, please. So Massachusetts is actually considered a best value state. We don't just take low bid, but use many things in our evaluation to determine the best value for the Commonwealth in our contracts. And the environment is one of those considerations. For EPPs, we have to consider price. We have to consider performance. In other words, does the product work? And whether it's available enough in the marketplace to be on such a large contract such as ours so that entities can purchase them. Next slide, please. So we specify many third-party certifications for products, which in effect outsources the environmental review for many of the products. And these are some of them that we require in the contracts. And we also keep a minimum EPP specifications guide. It compiles all of the requirements for products and services on the contracts into sort of one place. It makes it easier to find them. Next slide, please. So I thought it might be useful just to see how the EPP program works with sourcing teams, as we're really involved in most procurements. So we get a number of calls every, monthly, asking, how do we get on the list? How do we get on the list? We don't have a list. All vendors, they're required to bid on and be awarded a contract to be on a contract. So it has to be a fair, open, and transparent process for public, purposes. So if you're interested in bidding on the contract, if there are folks in this call, I've just included a link on this slide that goes over steps to consider and really how to get more help. But basically, I just want to show here that the EPP program is really involved all along the process. Next slide, please. So we also keep an online guide, which lists all of the EPPs on statewide contracts and how to find them. Next slide. And there's a lot of outreach that's done as well. We have a newsletter, by the way, and we have an EPP website. And just a little plug, we're holding a webinar on saving money with EPPs on Wednesday, the 26th. You can get more information on the OSD website on that. Next slide, please. So one of the requirements of the executive orders that we're required to write an annual report to document progress with the executive order. And we focus on metrics that I've listed here. We're hoping the fiscal year 21 annual report will be published at the end of February or beginning of March. So it's coming up soon. Next slide, please. Last year, we signed up to be a government recycling demand champion advocate through NERC. In partnership with the Association of Plastic Recyclers, and NERC does provide a lot of resources to those interested in helping promote products with post-consumer recycled content plastics. As you've heard, there's the webinar this afternoon, sort of a piece of that. OSD also developed a fact sheet that highlights contracts with post-consumer recycled products. Next slide, please. And as I said earlier, Executive Order 515, it does allow us to set minimum requirements for EPPs, which we have a number of them, and I've listed some of them here. And there is power to setting these standards. So in 2009, the Toxic Reduction Task Force, we recommended requiring environmentally preferable cleaning products, and we bid out in our next cleaning products contract with requirements for third-party certified chemicals and janitorial paper products. And last year alone, we did over $20 million in spend on the contract. So I really do truly believe that this contract that I just mentioned has really contributed to helping grow the marketplace for environmentally preferable cleaning products. which I've heard is about 30% of the market today. So just a quick note that other states are able to use our contracts as well. Next slide, please. So as for market development opportunities, if there's a demand for products or services, OSD will work to make them available on contract if we can. So my goal as the director of this program is really to get as many EPPs on the contract as possible. And when I work with sourcing teams to set specifications, there is a lot that goes into whether or not we can require an EPP specification, such as doing a deep market assessment to understand, as I said before, the price, the performance, and the availability of the products. So I've also been recommending in some contracts where the greener products are not yet where we want them to be in the marketplace, we'll require vendors to offer an EPP option along with a conventional option. And this at least makes the products available. And we have lots of desirable specifications throughout all of our contracts for EPP products. And then lastly, one issue I just wanted to, that I've seen over the years is that vendors who have one great EPP product and they're trying to figure out how to get that one product on statewide contract. And most of our contracts have requirements for a variety of products, which makes it really difficult for the one product vendors. And in this case, I usually recommend that they explore subcontracting with our prime vendors. And at least that gets them into the marketplace. And we've been experimenting with one of our contracts, FAC 100, for building maintenance, repair, and operations, where we have category 10, which is an EPP category, and we've left this category open for bidding. All the other categories are closed. That one is open, really to encourage new and innovative products. Unfortunately, it has not, really received a lot of bids, but at least it's a strategy to consider. And then last slide. So that's my presentation for today, and I hope it was helpful. And here's information on OSD and my contact information. So thank you very much for having me.
Awesome, Julia. Thank you. I know you kind of have a hard stop here at 11. So if we do have any questions, I'll try and get them over to you quickly here. Just a note for folks, watching these presentations, I realize with Zoom here and some of them you can't click on links. But I think in yours, Julia, you can. Or maybe it's because that's my computer. Yeah. So
are able to click on the link. So if you do
right.
share the presentation, you'll be able to link.
Okay. So yeah, basically what I was going to say was all this information, will be available after the meeting. So if people want to click around in presentations, it'll be up on the MassDEP website, and the recording of this, even with my my bad microphone, that will be available as well. I did see one question, Julia, before you go. Might trash bags be added to the EPP items? 10% PCR is easy to achieve.
So we do require in our environmentally preferable cleaning products contract that trash bags meet a 10% post-consumer recycled content requirement. And just FYI, I know that Green Seal right now is exploring adding a new third-party certification for trash bags. And I keep saying it's trash recycling bags too. But I'm very excited about that because that'll allow us to require the certifications in the future.
And Julia, one more, and I don't know if you can sum this up into a soundbite here, but what do you feel your biggest successes of the program have been so far?
I think that, we have so many products, environmentally preferable products on the contracts. And what we're really trying to do is push for vendors and manufacturers to label things properly so that when you're trying to find a product, that you can find a product and understand whether or not it either has post-consumer recycled content or has some type of third-party certification. that is one thing just nationally that I've been working on with a number of different contracts and that we've been requiring, because you need the buyers to know what it is they're buying, and to have some accountability there. So that's sort of one piece. There are a whole bunch of others.
Sure. Well, thank you.
And
for
you
the
can see
insight.
those in the annual report that's coming out. So
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you for your time and sharing some insight into the program. It's a valuable tool. We hope that this maybe prompts some folks to take advantage of it in one way or another. And Julia, I'm sure if folks have questions or comments, you'll be happy to address those.
absolutely. And anytime people can contact me, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Okay, so thanks to Julia. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can get over to our next presenter. And I believe up next is Mariana Mccormick, who's joining us from Mass Development in the Greater Boston office. She's the VP of Community Investment. This isn't your first time jumping on with us for one of our working groups. So we appreciate you coming back and wanting to share about some of the things that Mass Development is doing in this forum.
Yes, I am also having a little computer issues here myself.
Sure, yeah, I mean, take your time. If there's anything we can do, I have the slideshow, for instance, if you want me to share it, whatever.
No, I think we're in a good spot. Let me see if I could just make it a little bit more. I don't have it in presentation mode, but this should. So I am Mariana Mccormick with Mass Development. We are the state quasi that's charged with driving economic growth and community development. And we do that through a series of different financing programs. And it's been interesting since I've been here for about 4 years. I've been working with DEP and I've discovered that there's a lot of synergies. Beyond just the public purpose, when you have the ideas and when you have the needs, you need to figure out how you're going to pay for it. And that's where we come into play. So Mass Development, the way that we help, we help in a couple different ways. We have a real estate section, and we also have a financing section. So if you're a municipality or a large developer or even a business that's looking for opportunities to expand their sort of real estate portfolio, we have a real estate division that also owns the town of Devens. So it's something to keep in mind that the state actually owns the town and provides a lot of opportunities for, different and creative businesses that might want to kind of work more directly with the state and avoid some of the hiccups that might come with dealing with other municipalities. So that's always something to keep in the back of your mind. But today, what we're going to mainly talk about is how we can help finance large capital improvements through some of our tools that include tax-exempt bonds. And we'll go a little bit more into that. We also have the ability to lend our own money. And we can do guarantees because we also work very closely with banks. We also have real estate planning and development services. So if there's a particular idea or you're working with a municipality, we have the ability to, offer up different technical assistance, whether it be feasibility studies or kind of reuse studies. And then we also have PACE financing, and this is relatively new for us. So when there is an opportunity to upgrade your clean energy systems, we have an alternative financing solution that allows you to do this off book. And we'll talk more about each of these. Our goal is to not replace the banks, but partner with them so that they can offer you the most aggressive rates and also extend your borrowing capability and for them to be able to lend you more. So some of the advantages that we have is that we can offer lower cost loans, usually in the form of a tax-exempt bond if you fit the criteria, and that's just a lower interest rate. We also have flexible financing options that kind of work with these bonds. So the way that a tax-exempt bond works is that we will, if you are a nonprofit, a manufacturer, affordable housing, or solid waste, and you meet the criteria, we will work with your bank to offer them a tax-exempt bond that's going to result in a lower cost loan for the project that you want to take on. And there's a pretty strict criteria, and we can get into it on the individual, if you have individual projects you want to look at. But it's been really successful, and we've actually financed quite a few solid waste projects utilizing this function. So, as I said, there can be manufacturing facilities, nonprofits, probably are the ones that we do the most of because we have the most flexibility, but also remembering recycling environmental facilities also include. We also have lending programs. And we, again, try not to compete with the banks, but sometimes banks don't want to take on exposure for a large program. So we'll end up doing half of the loan and let the bank do the other half. And that way you can kind of get your whole program without having to go out and solicit multiple funding sources. We also do loans on equipment. And we can also work with your bank to extend the amount that they're willing to lend you through loan guarantees. We have a Brownfields redevelopment fund. So if there's any sites out there that require either remediation or assessment, it's either done through the one-stop program, which I think Margaret will touch a little bit on kind of going forward, or we will sometimes just fund them if it's a really good story, say if it's a housing project that's in a gateway city. And where I've surprisingly had a lot of success working with DEP is our Emerging Technologies Fund. This is an opportunity to finance disruptive technologies that are kind of pre-revenue, but have gone through a couple rounds of VC. So if you have a revolutionary product utilizing, say, glass to repurpose it in asphalt in a way that hasn't been done before, and you've received a little bit of funding and you've got a contract and you don't know how to make it happen, this is what this fund is for. And we're finding that in the space that you're in, that there's a lot of sort of creativity and disruptive technologies happening. And we would love to hear about them and see if this is something we can help you with. We also now, we've been working on this for a very long time, but last year it passed, is our Property Assessed Clean Energy Fund. So if you have a business that is looking to upgrade any clean energy systems, and that would include, say, solar power, but also the roof, windows, doors, HVAC. We can finance this through a municipality if they choose to opt in, that will treat it as a betterment assessment, so that this would be done off book, not affect your credit rating or the amount that you have to borrow. And it's done as an alternative lending source. And we can do this up to longer payback years on a lot of these clean energy systems to 20 years. So you're utilizing the projected savings from your clean energy upgrades by using that savings to pay back these loans. And it's been done in a lot of other states. Honestly, Massachusetts is a little late to the game in doing it, but it's a great opportunity to upgrade clean energy systems on any sort of commercial business. The only big caveat is it can't be a municipality. But other than that, we're really looking forward to talking to anybody who might have those programs, or if they're thinking about upgrading their clean energy systems, it's something they should talk to us about to see if it's appropriate. And then lastly, we have our Brownfields Redevelopment Fund. And we can do lending up to $100,000 for site assessment. It's unsecured. There's 0 interest loans. We also have flexible cleanup funds. And it's got to be in an economically distressed area and have a public purpose to it. But when it comes up to cleaning existing sites for reuse, it's something that, again, it's what we're set up to do, and we're really kind of looking for people to partner on that. Our Brownfields Redevelopment Fund is usually, for most parties, gone through our one-stop program, but it's always worth reaching out to us. We can talk about how the programs work and what we could do to kind of get you ready to either do it off round, so it's not done through a normal competitive, or if it's something that has to go through a competitive round, we can talk to you what the parameters of that is. And this is my contact information, and also Benny Wong, who's in charge of the tax-exempt bond program for Greater Boston. But you could always reach out to me. I work very closely with Benny. And really, you know, kind of want to be a partner for you out there when you're looking to think about how you want to pay for these things to happen. Because you have a lot more creativity and a lot more flexibility than just the traditional banking route. And we could make it a little bit easier for you, or make your money go a little bit further. So.
Great, thanks, Mariana. I know there's some great resources available here, and again, the kind of point of this meeting is to get the lay of the land. Let people know, if you don't know for whatever reason, that there's some great tools available here, and if you already do, well, then let's start doing it. And your contact information is there. And again, like I said, we'll distribute these presentations after this meeting. So if anybody needs to get in touch, certainly welcome to do so. So thanks for sharing your time with us today. Okay, now we're going to, and let's see, I did check the chat. I don't think there was anything pursuant to Mariana's presentation. So I think we'll move along now to Margaret Laforrest, who is from the Mass Office of Business Development. And I see you there, Margaret. We just got to get you, screen sharing, and we can get you
unmuted. Here we go.
Unmuted. Awesome. There you are.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
Let me just get this started here from the
Sure.
beginning. Okay. So thank you so much, Sean, for having me. Mariana, great to see you virtually. Mariana and I actually share the same physical office space in Quincy. So we work very closely with her. So today I'm going to give a pretty high level overview of the Mass Office of Business Development and how we can help the companies on this phone call. We are, I think we missed a slide there, the Baker Polito Administration's executive team for business development. Our role, we work with, oftentimes with the large companies. If a company is interested in coming to the Commonwealth from elsewhere in the country, setting up a new site selection, putting an incentive package together with them, or we also work with small companies and connect you to any program, grant, or incentive offered by the Commonwealth or any of our quasi-agencies. So today, 2 of our agency partners, Mass Development and OSD, were on the call. If you and I were talking, we curate the call for you, and those would be some agencies I may be referring to. The primary program managed by the Mass Office of Business Development is the Economic Development Incentive Program. So this is for when a company has a large capital expenditure they're making and job creation, that local municipalities can offer real estate tax relief, and sometimes the state will provide tax credits for the job creation. So if you're looking to expand your business, make a significant investment, that investment is going to increase your real estate taxes. The municipality can provide real estate tax relief in the form of a tax increment financing agreement, and that can provide anywhere from 5 to 100% of that new growth for a period of 5 to 20 years. So it can be a real significant value to a company, and our agency works with the company to guide them through the program as well as the municipality. Some of the other programs that we are hands-on with, the Regional Economic Development Organization, these are located regionally throughout the Commonwealth, oftentimes co-located with a Chamber of Commerce, and help drive the Commonwealth's economic development strategy. Also within the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development is the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism. So we work closely with that agency in helping promote their programs. They right now have the Travel and Tourism Recovery Grant Program. It closes next week, $50,000 for a nonprofit, up to I think 200,000 or 150,000 if there's a few partners. So it's just a really a great program that we're trying to, provide support. That hospitality industry has really lagged. So as we are going to come out of the winter, we want to make sure they have those resources. And then you've probably heard about Mass Growth Capital. This was our partner agency at HED. We provided over $700 million in small business grant support during COVID. They're often running many of our grant programs. So as we, look at what ARPA funding is coming around, if there are any new programs curated, that may be an agency. They also are a working capital funder. They also say for if you were looking to help maybe transition a company to an employee or to a family member who wouldn't maybe have the same financing status that the existing owner would, can help with that as well. So they're a great agency. The hot topic of late really has been around workforce development. The Commonwealth has the Mass Hire Career Center. This is under Secretary Acosta, the Labor and Workforce Development. But the career centers can help you with job postings, with screening resumes. If you don't have that HR department, we have an agency that can really serve in that role and support your company. They can, of course, coming off of COVID with a higher unemployment rate, they have those who are collecting unemployment now need to do job search criteria. So they have access to a pool of candidates. And one thing I want to talk is a little bit out of order in the slide, the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. This is kind of a form that as you are hiring, that you could have an employee fill out. And so one of is different criteria of how you'd be eligible to take this tax credit when hiring. One is for a veteran, one is for someone on food stamps, one is for someone on long-term unemployment, right? So right now you've got kind of this pool of candidates that you may be able to take advantage of a tax credit when hiring them. So there's a list of barriers to employment that would qualify a candidate in easy form. So something I like to let people know about. And then the work-share program, this was something really helpful during COVID for companies who, really wanted to keep their employees on, but not being able to afford them full-time. So they could have the employee work part-time and then collect unemployment for the balance of hours that they would have been working. And so during COVID, when they had that federal $300 and $600 benefits, if you had your employee you were maintaining and you're paying for their hours they worked, you're paying their benefits, but they were collecting, even if it was a day's worth of unemployment, they were entitled to that additional federal benefit. And in the flip side, as you're like, well, I laid staff off and I'm ready to bring staff back on, but maybe I'm not ready to bring them on full time, that would be another way for you to kind of reverse that and onboard staff at a reduced rate and then allow them to continue to collect some unemployment. These are some other great resources. So and I really try to focus today's topics on resources that are applicable to all companies in the Commonwealth. It's kind of like the low-hanging fruit slide deck of what you can leverage. So each of you, as you're paying your payroll in your W-2 forms, now that you're hearing this, you're going to look and see the WTF fee, the WTFP, Workforce Training Fund Program is that acronym in the Commonwealth. And employers pay a fee into this program. Well, that fee funds the Workforce Training Fund, and then you as an employer can draw upon that in the form of a grant to afford training funds for your incumbent staff. And so you can leverage up to $250,000 basically on a 3-year rotation. They do have some smaller programs, and honestly, this is really kind of customizable to what your needs are. The Commonwealth, all of our community colleges have corporate education departments that can help write these grants for you. Sometimes there'll be a training vendor. For example, some of the smaller companies may have kind of their bookkeeper being their HR person as a collateral duty. Well, with COVID, boy, has that been a complicated collateral duty, and maybe you want to certify someone in HR. So you could send them to the community college, fund that training with the Workforce Training Fund, and yet you'd be paying your salary and benefits of that employee. So I think that the Commonwealth is particularly known for the investments we make in our talent, and this is a unique funding source that you're able to utilize these grant funds. So I really encourage you to take a look at that program. There was some comments in the chat about safety, and so these two programs, are really terrific. So first is, I'm going to start with the safety consultation. So if a company was visited by OSHA and OSHA was doing a review, OSHA's way is to go through, look at things, and as they would find something, it's kind of like ding, 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 and here's your ticket and penalty for what we found. Well, the Commonwealth has a consultation program that's free to companies. You don't need to apply. You need to make a phone call and get a consultation scheduled. And you're really proactive saying, how is it that we can review our operations to see what the potential safety or health hazards are going to be and make then corrections. There's no fee. They don't call OSHA and say, hey, we found these, deficiencies. They work with you and help to bring you into compliance. And in partnership with that, our second program we have, and this one's from Division of Industrial Accidents. Every year, usually in May, the funds get released for the safety training grant. This is like one quick application. I can give you a sample application, provide you a list of vendors who offer the training that's most likely going to be applicable to you. And so this is about opportunities to improve safety in the workplace. And really anything that's kind of safety training related could be funded with this safety training grant up to $25,000, and you can apply for these funds every single year. There's other things to kind of note here, like if you had a fleet of vehicles on the road, for example, you're likely in the high risk auto insurance pool. And when you hired the employee who's going to be on the road, you'd probably said, do you have a mass driver's license? And we need a copy of that. Well, if you send that driver now, who is a licensed driver, but send them to, for example, defensive driving class, well, you're going to improve your employees' skills on the road and likely reduce accidents. But as an ancillary benefit, you show your auto insurance company that you sent this employer to defensive driving, they often reduce your auto insurance rates. So not only did you improve it, reduce the accidents, and now you also save some money. So there's other, just ways that you look at how you can benefit from some of these programs. So technical assistance, this is one, there's just so much. Sometimes it's, I need help. I want to do that safety training grant. I need someone to help me through the process. And our small business technical assistance providers, whether it's the Small Business Development Center, whether it's SCORE, Center for Women in Enterprise, the Veterans Outreach Center, any of these really have staff who free to you could help you. Sometimes it's a matter of you need help looking at your financial statements. It's really, what's the help you need? Who is it that we have to help you with it? And there's kind of free help to be had. So it's a lot of them do similar things. MassDEP Capital has a small business technical assistance program that's terrific. Providers throughout the state as well. And so I really, tell people I'm happy to connect you with whomever is most appropriate for you. And honestly, role of MOBD is kind of leading Team Massachusetts. So oftentimes there's a company that'll come to us and, explain what they have going on, and I'll coordinate a call, virtual meeting with our Team Massachusetts partners. So, if you're a manufacturer who's growing your business and looking for a new location, well, you'll probably have myself, Mass Econ doing site selection, Mass Development, like Mariana talked about, doing some financing, maybe the municipalities you're interested in. We'll put whoever is appropriate for you on that call is a single, and then I'm your kind of single point of contact to help you navigate. So some of the partners we work with really closely. So I mentioned earlier, Mass Growth Capital, really working capital financing, a lot of our grant programs. Mariana mentioned, Mass Development. Mass Ventures is our venture capital funding. Mass Bio, Mass Life Science Centers, we really have a lot of work. Mass Life Science Center has a great tax incentive program. Mass Econ does site selection. They do labor market intelligence. Commonwealth Corporation, Mass Medic is another one on the life science biotech. The Commonwealth Corporation handles our workforce training fund grants. Mass Tech Collaborative, they've got this particular great internship program, a lot of funding programs. We're seeing a lot of action in the Mass Clean Energy Center space with our offshore wind. Any of the international companies coming in, or we'll put you on a call with Mark Sullivan. He's the executive director of the Mass Office of International Trade and Investment. The Mass MEP, I don't know if we have any manufacturers on the line here, but they are terrific, and you can work with the Mass MEP and fund a lot of their programs using the state's money, the Workforce Training Fund grant. And then that brings us to the Small Business Development Center. So Small Business Development Center does a lot with startups, but they do a lot with, you need that grant application completed. They're kind of a good gateway starting point as well. So we are divided up regionally. I am one of 6 regional directors for the Commonwealth. I'm going to provide you each of our contact information, and just know that each time we have a call with a company, we curate what it is you have going on. What are your needs? Is it workforce? Is it safety? Is it, growth? What resources does the Commonwealth have? We try to save you from, opening 100 windows on your computer, trying to figure out what are the right resources. Someone mentioned a program, we really help you navigate that. So I welcome you to take our contact information down. I'm happy to schedule a call with anybody. It's great. I haven't seen this many people on Zoom since kind of early COVID. So kudos to MassDEP for getting a great participation today. So if myself or any of my colleagues, depending on where you are, but we're really kind of community agnostic. We'll go wherever. This is a small crew of us covering the Commonwealth. So don't worry about, geez, am I in Western Mass, wherever. Just reach out to me. And if sometimes it makes value to have, hey, I don't know everybody out in Western Mass, but I can make a phone call and figure out who to connect you with as we go through. So that's what I have for you today, and I do welcome any questions.
Great, thank you, Margaret. And you mentioned, Mariana kind of mentioned, Julia mentioned, kind of the synergy of different organizations here. How you folks and others on the call can work together towards solutions. And sometimes when we're talking about the recycling sector, these are the sorts of approaches that we need to get business done. So we're thankful for your ability to execute those things, and we're thankful for your time. I do have a couple of questions here that rolled in the chat. One was from Kathy Mirza, who's here at MassDEP. She says, does the work opportunity tax credit apply to the formerly incarcerated?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
And then Amy
And
Perlmutter.
there's also disabilities. There's a list of the criteria, but disabled is another one. Long-term unemployment, veteran. Those are off the top of my head, but there's got to be a dozen others.
Awesome. Amy Perlmutter also said, an FYI, DEP helped fund a series of studies years ago that looked at workforce development professionals in the state and the recycling industry, how they can work together. NERC and the Environmental Business Council participated, and she dropped a link into the chat. That was at 11:22. If anybody wants to take a look at that, might have lost it in the course of the chat. So I think that's everything that we had relative to your presentation, Margaret. So thank you again, and thank you to all our presenters today. So this particular work group, as I'm perusing through the chats here, I mean, this is a kickoff meeting. This is one of hopefully many meetings, and there's really no formal alignment here, no committee or council or anything like that. This is open to the public, to private industry, to government, to whomever wants to attend and ask questions, give suggestions, give feedback. So while we have right now about a half hour left on the clock, we hope to have focused conversations in the future on specific materials, specific industries, approaches in different states, some of the stuff that Claudine mentioned in her presentation earlier in the call. So I don't want folks to think like, hey, this work group, we're just going to talk at you, for 90 minutes every meeting. It is meant to be interactive. We've had a ton of interaction from the attendees, and we're going to get to some of those questions now. And, from this meeting into future meetings, we definitely want to generate as much discussion as possible, because that's how we're going to learn and get to solutions that work. So, thanks to everyone who spoke, and I'm going to dig up a few questions here from the chat. And boy, is it laborious, because there have been so many chats. To go through them all takes some time. It's like, hit the arrow button up and up and up and up, and here we are. I think Margaret addressed a safety question from earlier in the webinar from Lewis. We did have a question, or we did have a remark from Susan Casino from the city of Boston, which I think is an interesting little comment, that Boston has started a deconstruction initiative in order to reduce construction and demolition waste. It's part of their zero waste plan. We got a question from Laura Foote earlier about whether nonprofits would be eligible for MassDEP grants. And I think, John or Claudine, you could jump in. I think specifically what Laura said, would an organization like Boston Building Resources be able to be eligible for a grant? And again, I think the recycling loan fund, that's a reuse business, for instance. So the recycling loan fund would apply to that. I think the recycling business development grants are for targeted materials. We have micro grants, I know, that are available. Anything else that we can think of, John or Claudine, that would be relevant to that question?
I think, on Rbdg, the answer is yes. It just needs to be for one of the target material categories listed, but that there certainly, could be applicable for a place like the Building Materials Reuse Center. So yeah, the answer is yes there.
Okay. We had a question from Jeff Azano Brown. And this is a pretty wide open one, considering we just did or are doing textiles, mattresses, and an expanded food waste ban. But Jeff asks, are any other items being considered for a waste ban before the 2040 master plan process begins?
So there's really only one that's potentially on our radar screen at this point, and that is whether we would ultimately further lower the threshold for the commercial organics ban. Mm-hmm. So we did flag that in the solid waste master plan as something we would assess as part of our mid-year review in 2025. So that's the one material at this point that we flagged as a potential waste ban item. There is quite a bit, I believe, that would need to happen to make that work, but that's the next material. We've mentioned specifically. At this time, we haven't identified any others in the short term. But as we go and as we work through these work groups, we may come up with other suggestions along the way, and we'll certainly consider those. I would say, kind of as you referenced, Sean, that a waste ban process is really a minimum of 2 years and probably closer to 3 to 4 years to line up everything that we need to make it happen and make it work.
Yeah, it's definitely a process, but that's not to say that we're not looking at doing stuff down the line and studying emerging waste streams. That's something that's going on too right now. With like solar panels, for instance, we getting a lot of conversation about what are we going to do with solar panels when they get decommissioned. So all these sorts of things are on our radar as well. We had a comment about asking about mercury, and John answered that with a link to the Mercury Management Act page on the MassDEP website. That's those particular hazards aren't really addressed within the solid waste master plan, but we do have a page with information on how that is addressed in the state of Massachusetts. I know during Julia's presentation, she mentioned the government recycling demand champions. There was a link from Lynn at 10:48, just so you have the timestamp and know where to look. If you want some more information on the government recycling demand champions. So that was another helpful piece as well. There was a lot of conversation about compostable items going in to the EPP program, also in the chat. And I'd encourage folks right now too, if you want to jump in, ask a question, you can do it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. That's also a function that we have here that we can utilize. Let me see. Okay, we have a link from Hillary Nichols mentioning the U.S. Composting Council would like to support the development of compost use specifications. So she linked to some resources there. Lynn also from NERC dropping a link, a webinar on markets for finished compost, February 23rd, hosted in partnership with NUMOA. Have a couple of questions and some feedback with folks about the size of this group, how we're going to collect feedback, how we can kind of get everybody in on the conversation. Yeah, I understand this. A group this large might seem pretty cumbersome. Like I said, we are looking to have more focused meetings in the future. With Zoom, we have the ability to do breakout groups, which is something that we're certainly going to consider. And, I think we have, John, I think we have everyone's registration information. So I think it would be valuable to reach out afterwards and not only distribute the resources, but also solicit feedback on what people may be looking for from these meetings and everybody's background.
Yeah, I think one thing I wanted to note is that we'll do the best we can to get input at these meetings, and I think getting input at these meetings is really important because everyone hears it together. So there's some opportunity to build on comments in the meetings. We also certainly encourage comments and input offline in between meetings. So that's another way for us to get more input along the way. You certainly don't have to wait for a meeting to comment to us. One of the things we'll be doing as we go is asking some specific questions of all of you. So I think along with the potential use of breakout rooms, we may think about some other tools to gather information, something like a SurveyMonkey survey or something like that, just to gather, broader input on specific questions as we go. I think those are some of the things we're thinking about, but we'd also welcome, other process suggestions as we go. We're, as Sean's mentioned a few times, this is our first step in this process. We got a long way to go, and we're not completely set in our ways. So, we're open to suggestions for how to best structure some of the conversations as we go. And I think the breakout groups is potentially an interesting one. We want to make sure we can adequately support that if we're to do it. But, I think there's a lot here as you've seen already. So we do want to think about how we can break this up and make it manageable.
Michelle White, actually, and I think Michelle's with the Cape Cod Commission, if I'm not mistaken, says, will specific info on current recycling markets and businesses be presented at some point? And I think the answer there is yes. I think if there's market information from Massachusetts that we can utilize, if there's market development programs from other states that we can talk about and their models, if there's businesses that can serve as case studies in any of the work that we're trying to do here for specific materials or sectors, that's all the sort of stuff that's going to be on the table here. There's a learning process here. We don't just put together a plan and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. I think there'll be some interesting opportunities to learn in that regard. And again, if you do want to raise your hand, that's under reactions on the toolbar down at the bottom of your screen. If anyone has specific comments. Otherwise, John, Claudine, we can just kind of do lightning round with some of the remaining questions that are in the hopper here, if you'd like.
Sure, let's try to address those if we can.
Okay. Let me just pull it up here. I'll go right back to the top. Let's start with, I think I know where I want to start. We had a comment from Robin Ingenthron about vinyl flooring. This was way back at 1027. More of a comment than a question, but that vinyl flooring should be included as C and D. The definition based on the origin of generation. The other is by material, but plastics is generally meant to say containers. I think that goes back to earlier in John's presentation about, and we were talking about waste characterization, right, John?
Yes, I did put a link to the waste characterization data in the chat. What we really need to do is to go in and look at the specific definitions to answer a specific question like that. And I don't have those right in front of me here. But the other thing I noted, and I noted this in a comment I sent back to Jay, but I'll just, Jay Thomas from the Vinyl Sustainability Council, but I'll mention it to everyone, is that data I flashed up was data based on the materials found in our municipal solid waste stream. And MassDEP does have a separate report specific on construction and demolition debris waste and estimated composition of that in addition to what's in the municipal solid waste. So I'm going to put that, put the link to that study up in the chat as well.
Great. And yeah, I think, with some of these specific questions where we may not have an answer immediately, we do get a chat log from these meetings, so we can always field that and get back to you offline via email and let you know. Laura Foote had another question about, is anyone in Massachusetts using robots in sorting solid waste? She links to a company called AMP or amprobotics.com. So if anybody has an answer to that, we'll certainly throw that one out there. Let's see. Some of the EPP, some talk about compostable cafeteria food trays and adding those to the EPP, compostable bags and other compostable items. Amy Donovan says it would be great to see the BPI logo on a list of third-party certifiers. So that's one that we can certainly direct to Julia over at OSD. There was some question about PFAS. Everybody loves talking about PFAS these days. Compostable items being coated in PFAS. And there was a clarification from Ari Perlmutter that said, BPI certified compostables don't contain PFAS. Let's see. Anything else here specifically? John, are you seeing any raised hands?
There's just, I'm not sure I'm going all the way through in order here.
Yeah.
But trying to catch ones we haven't talked about yet. So let's see, there was a comment from Wayne Spritz about kind of a process and organization, actually two process and organization type suggestions. So one, to suggest breaking groups down by subject and having a moderator, no more than 10 to 12 per group, so everyone can feel comfortable with input.
Yeah.
The 10 to 12 might be tough. If we were doing that here today, we'd need about 15 moderators, and I don't have 15 moderators, but
we'll take volunteers. Anyone, submit your resumes.
The suggestion of breaking groups down to some level would be helpful. And then there's a follow-up comment to that. Everyone comes in with different backgrounds and skill sets. How can we get some good synergy? Maybe you can collect this information from participants and then assign us to the various particular interests we can contribute toward. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think one of the next steps we can think about is perhaps a survey on people's interests and priorities and areas of focus. And then we can consider that as the basis, one, for, what we should be talking about in general, but then two, how we can maybe form, the groups that may be of greatest interest to people. And, we may not capture a group for absolutely everything, but, I think if we do that, we can make sure we're addressing the issues that most people want to talk about.
Yeah, and I have seen in these questions, we are getting some really hyper specific things, and we realize this is, it's useful to have so many people from so many different outlets, whether it's MassDEP or any of the organizations that presented today, Center for Ecotechnology, who runs our Recycling Works program, there on the call. We realize there's businesses that are out there saying, what do I do with this material? What do I do with that material? So yeah, there's certainly value in being able to answer those questions too. But yeah, I do think that we want to focus this group, or focus subgroups within this group, and really asking the audience, phoning a friend, as they used to say on TV, and getting everybody's information and ideas about what they want to talk about would be helpful to us. I did have a question come in from Kevin Miller. Will there be consideration in taking category 3 waste out of the formula as it relates to the, okay, so this is our C&D recycling question, as it relates to the minimum performance standards? John, I don't know if you can take a swing at that one.
Yeah, I can take a crack at that. Just to clarify for those who aren't familiar with this, so we have set what we call a minimum performance standard for our construction and demolition debris facilities in Massachusetts. It sets a minimum of 15% separation of recyclable materials across the board, and that's inclusive of all of the materials those facilities take in. The reference to category 3 is what we call bulky waste materials, and we've set the standard to be inclusive of construction and demolition materials, as well as bulky waste materials. And there's been some concern among those in the industry that this bulky waste stream is lower value and has less recoverable material than the construction and demolition stream. At this point, we do not intend to change that. We believe, the 15% standard was set with the idea that it was appropriate for the C&D materials together with the bulky waste materials. However, we are looking into conducting a study that would focus on the composition of these bulky waste loads that are coming into C&D facilities to get more information on the composition of those loads and what amount of recoverable material is in those loads, to provide more, data relative to this decision. And we'd certainly, take that data into account going forward. I do see a couple hands, Sean.
Yeah, I see Wayne Spritz and Michael Berry. We'll start with Wayne. He's first in the queue, and I think I just asked you to, or I might have asked you to unmute Wayne. Are you able to unmute your mic?
Got it.
Great.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for allowing me to talk.
Of
I
course.
I really look forward to this group, but I kind of see this as a hopefully some sort of an effort to truly develop markets, right, for a lot of the goods that hopefully could be diverted or better recycled. It's well known that a lot of the recycled material, right, that goes into our MRFs, it's not a really highly efficient process, and a lot of it ends up going to disposal, as well as depending upon the markets, both pretty much regionally, not just nationally, but regionally. Sometimes they just pile up and they don't have a need, right? So we've seen this with glass. We see this with a lot of other harder to recycle materials. And there's some really specific challenges. And as we've noted here in the meeting, there's a lot of very hyper specific questions. So it kind of goes to my point that I was suggesting before, which is, I have a certain background. Everyone here's got a certain background, and I think we all have something to share and to add. But I would ask you guys as leadership to, again, I'll go back to the comment that I had, which is really collect, what our own skill sets are, so that we know how we're going to best add to this. Because this is, I think, less about trying to find out what policies are, but in this first meeting, finding out who the players are, which is great, right? Because I didn't personally realize a couple of these different particular organizations. So it's fantastic information,
Sure.
but a lot of us come from business. A lot of us come from communities. How can we synergize to break down into specific groups where we can come up with new ideas? The idea is, hopefully that we're going to be able to get some feedback and work with a collective of us to come up with innovation progress here, so that we're really jumping to the next level, not just kind of doing the same old thing. So how do we capture that? And I think how we capture that is by having not just, maybe there's 10 groups and each one of those has individually 10 to 12, maybe there's a couple of groups, but if you get beyond that number, it becomes kind of chaotic and it doesn't allow for kind of individual contribution. So hopefully you could take that feedback. Again, I'm looking forward to contributing, but it's clearly impossible with 150 people, and maybe we can have breakout sessions, not just within a specific meeting, but multiples over the month. Maybe you can kind of schedule, right, on a regular basis, so that we can kind of all contribute with our own skill sets, right, in a very specific manner. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we can definitely take that suggestion into account, and it's a good one. So thanks, Wayne, for the input. Now we'll call on Michael. Michael, you should be seeing an invitation to unmute here.
Found it.
Great.
My question was this: I work a little bit with Brownfields, which if someone isn't familiar with that term, it's just unused properties. Most of them are contaminated, if not all. And I found in looking around, and it's something I learned with some quality training, that if you're having problems, look around to find out how someone else is handling that problem. And believe it or not, I went to Wisconsin to see how they did stuff. And it is very surprising to look around, and every now and again, you can go to any place. And the reason I did that was there was occasionally these brownfields get left to the state to clean up, and even these wind turbines, which have a 15 to 25-year life. Well, if someone if fails, they leave it for the government to pick up.
Yeah.
In Wisconsin, they had laws. You had to place a bond before you could get that project approved. And it's things like that. And I see some of these other states that do things. And so my question to you is, do we occasionally, I see what we're doing today, but occasionally do you meet with these states and say, listen, this is a problem that we're having, how are you handling it? Because I'll tell you something, in the Malcolm Baldridge courses that I took, fantastic what you can gain from this stuff. I'll tell you one other thing. We just received a package from Amazon, and I opened it up, and it was one calendar for 1 year. You could not believe the packaging material that was in there. And I said, and it's too bad. I'm looking, I says, oh my God. So the younger generation understands some of this stuff, but yet they feel nothing about unpackaging all this bubble wrap, the peanuts, everything like that, for a calendar that I could have easily picked up at a Staples.
Yeah, you're not kidding with that. I mean, I know that some online retailers have options, to have all of your items delivered on the same day, things like that. There's options out there. It's, will people actually take advantage of those options? Are they intuitive for them to get to those options? For instance, I won't say who, but say a brick and mortar convenience type chain with really long receipts that they print out. They have an option where you can just get an email receipt, and you don't have to print out a 6 foot long receipt after every visit to that store. But again, how do you register for that? Is it intuitive? Can the employee in the store help you do that efficiently? We need to make these sorts of solutions easy for people to achieve. And that's, I don't know, to tie it back into the group at large here, we're trying to make, get information out there, to make connections that otherwise, people may not have seen, may not have thought were possible. And to both of your points, I mean, learning about what's being done elsewhere is going to be very instructive here towards what Massachusetts wants to do in the future.
Hey, Sean, I can just add one comment on the looking to other states, or maybe two comments. One is we do that on an ongoing basis, both through the Northeast Recycling Council that we spoken about a little bit today, as well as New MOA, which is the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association. So we have regular discussions with our Northeast state counterparts through those groups. At our next meeting, or one of our upcoming meetings, we are looking forward to sharing some information on other state market development programs. So that's something that we've been looking at leading up to this work group about, what are some of the other state programs that we may want to emulate. So, that's something that we will be sharing and talking about probably at our next meeting, but we'll figure out that scheduling exactly.
John, and I'll leave you with this, because this has been another one that I've run into. Sometimes the assessment, the help for the money to clean up some of these brownfields, it's more grant writing and posturing and everything like that, rather than someone looking at a site and say, this is a very dangerous site. This has got contamination in it and is near a waterway. Something like that. Or this is as in happened in Rockland, Massachusetts. This is a big old structure that's going to catch fire, and there's a lot of houses around there. They woke up people at 3 o'clock in the morning. They burned the power lines. They shut down schools and everything. That thing was textbook. You could have figured that one out easy. That should have been redlined. My view, should have been redlined and addressed. You shouldn't have had to go through approval process. That's a problem waiting to happen. That thing probably cost 4 times more to the state to clean up than if that had been addressed early. And that's coming from someone that's worked for a dismantling firm. 4 times more. So when you're looking for, the DEP is looking for money and stuff like that, right there, it starts with savings.
Good points, Michael. Thank you. I do see, and we're bumping up against the noon hour here.
Yep.
I do see one more hand raise from Andrew Brousseau, so I'm gonna unmute Andrew. I think folks are welcome to hang on the call here. It's not like we have a hard stop. So again, thanks, Michael, and to Wayne for your comments. Andrew, I think you should see a command here to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Andrew Brousseau from Black Earth Compost. I'll just be real quick. I want to say that I think what Massachusetts is doing is, at least within the organic space, is the right path. Like, I like how you guys stage the waistband, how it started at, getting the large guys, let the private industry build up, and then drop the threshold again, let the private industry build up. I think that's a really good strategy. It's like a public-private partnership. And I think that we're kind of leading the nation in that regard. We're the only state with a waistband. And I think that the state can leverage that, public-private partnership, and you can harvest ideas from the business community who has been working under that framework. And so I second Wayne's suggestion of breakout groups on specific things, and the state can harvest ideas from the business community and then, see what works best under, the state's frameworks, and then push those forward. And then that's going to keep Massachusetts leading the nation. Because I know that, other states are looking to Massachusetts. People from other states call me all the time, and they're impressed, and they think that we're leading the nation, and I agree.
Thank you. Yeah, and to your point and to previous points, I mean, what someone who's interested in developing the composting market is going to be very different from someone who's looking at C&D market development, is going to be different from someone who's looking at brownfield sites. Maybe there's tie-ins here and there, but those are generally separate conversations. So yeah, I think our next step here is we're going to be reaching out to you. We want to hear from you. And hey, it's great to have a kickoff meeting with 150 people. And just about 100 people still hanging on here after the meeting technically is supposed to end. So we love that enthusiasm, and we want to do right by the participants in the group. This is important stuff here. This is your communities and your businesses. So we'll be thoughtful in our approach on that. So we really appreciate all these suggestions, all these questions. You can keep the questions coming. I know our contact information was up in some earlier slides. We have a chat log with probably some unanswered questions and some links and materials that we can distribute around. So we're going to get to all of that in the coming days and weeks. So it's not like we're just going to disappear and then a month later we'll be like, okay, we're going to meet again. If you're in this group, we'll at least reach out and try to connect again on some of these outstanding things. So thanks again to you folks for participating, for being so active. Thanks to those who spoke. John or Claudine, do you have any parting words in particular on this call?
I want to thank everyone. I know solar panels was brought up earlier, and
Yeah.
we've done a lot of research on that with help from Recycling Works and various folks within MassDEP. So that certainly is on our radar. But yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for their participation today.
Thanks
And
again. Yeah.
one thing I would also mention is that when we did our outreach for this group, we conducted outreach through many different channels. So I'm not sure how everyone heard about the meeting today. We sent out outreach through a bunch of different lists, and we'll continue to do that for a little bit. But ultimately, we want to prepare, and we have prepared, but we want to make sure it's complete, a list of interested people for this work group in particular. So we do have email addresses from the Zoom registration, which we plan to use. If you don't want to be on our list and you're on the call today, please let us know. But we're going to assume if you're registered for the call that you're interested and want to be updated. So we're going to try to build out that list, and ultimately, going forward, we'll kind of eventually settle into using that one outreach email list for this group. So if you're interested, or if you know of others who are interested, please get in touch with us and share contact information. You can run that through you, Sean, and we'll make sure that we have you on our list to keep updated as we go with resources and meeting links and requests for information and so on. So just, if you're on a call today, you should be all set. But if you know anyone else who wants to join, just refer them over to us, and we'll make sure we get you on our list to stay informed.
Yeah, certainly. The more the merrier, but we want to make sure that everybody is in their right place so we can represent everybody's interests properly going forward. So thanks, John, Claudine. Thanks to everyone. And we'll end this meeting for today with conversations to continue in the coming days and weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again.